Serious parents who have adopted or older child, 5 and up, how has it gone for you? Do you regret it, or would you recommend other parents considering adoption look into a older child? My story is a bit different. I was coaching a soccer team and had a kid in the foster program on the team. He was 13. Over the course of the season my wife and I really got to know him and saw how chisty his foster parents were. At the end of the season we asked him if he wanted to come live with us instead. It's been 9 years since then. We had rough patches, but for us it was easy. We were still a young couple, 24 and 27, then, but his social worker arranged continued funding for us, which eliminated any financial burden. It was an easy decision for us, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat. We've had 4 of his other biological siblings live with us at one time or another as they've aged out of foster care. They all have their own unique problems, but all kids do. His 18-year-old sister asked to come quarantine with us, so we've got her staying here now. His brothers and sister are all just extra family, and our biological little ones, 3 and 5, call them all brother/sister. He's 22 now and almost done with college and hopes to be a police officer. Sadly my wife and I will be moving out of state soon and we'll miss him like crazy, but no, we've prepared him for life outside our home. We'll still be there for him of course, but we're excited to see him thrive independently. His girlfriend of 4 years is pushing him to move to our new state once they both finish school, so they may still be back near us soon enough. My spouse and I did something similar. We both worked in the system in California doing different jobs. My job was being the administrator for 3 group homes, 2 of which were short-term placements for kids who had just been removed from their homes for abuse and neglect. Our agency contracted with the county, but was based out of a different state. We moved out to California to do very specific jobs at the request of our administrative headquarters, where we were working previously. During our time in California, our agency decided to close our office in a number of states including California. We had grown to love living there, so when we were offered promotions back at our headquarters, we told the agency that we would consider it. One thing that I couldn't get off my mind is that we had a sibling set of 4 who were going to be split up into foster care, because at the time there were not any 4-bed homes open. After a lot of thought, my wife and I tuned down promotions, found new jobs, got our foster license, moved, sold a car, and replaced it with a van all within 90 days. The kids moved in on the 87th day after we announced our closure. I want to preface the rest of this story with the following. Foster care is not designed for people who are looking to adopt cheaply. It is designed to aid in family reunification. We fostered our kids, and it was difficult because we had kids ages 5, 6, 11, and 13, all of whom bore their trauma differently. After about 6 months we were asked if we would be willing to adopt. We went into fostering, having decided that we would be open to the idea, but that was not our priority. We told the kids, you have a place here as long as you need it, even if that ends up being forever. To make a long and difficult story short, our adoption was finalized about a year later. Adoption is hard for everyone. I'm a highly trained professional who still works in the system, albeit in a much different capacity, and it can be a challenge every day. My wife is also a highly trained professional, and I know it stretches her as well. Most kids, even those who are adopted at birth, often exhibit signs of trauma. Kids who are adopted out of foster care almost always do. Often, that trauma looks like bad behavior, but if you address it with punishment, you'll only get more of the same, because you're not addressing the underlying issue. To truly parent in a trauma-informed way requires tons of patience, knowledge, and most of all empathy. I currently work for an agency that among other things works with transitional age youth. These are kids between 16 to 22 that are either living independently through a SILP, live in an independent living program, or are on their own, but still technically a ward of the court. These kids have had multiple failed foster placements and or failed adoptions. Their stories are heartbreaking because the adults in their lives, who had good intentions, failed them. Good intentions are not enough. To make foster care or adoption work, you have to be prepared to give a lot, even when you feel like you can't give any more, just like you would do with your biological child. Our kids are doing well, but we've had a lot of very high points punctuated with some very low points because our kids are just now starting to really work through their trauma. We can cycle through feeling elated, despondent, angry, aggravated, and back to elated all within a few hours time with each kid. But you know what? That's pretty normal for most parents. Keeping a healthy perspective can be difficult at times. Edit. I didn't expect this post to get so much attention, but now that it has, I'm going to post a few resources, subreddits of interest. 1/r/foster-it, foster parents, potential foster parents, and foster youth all welcome. 2/r/foster parents, tends to center around foster parent experiences. A good place to get information on what it's like to be a foster parent. 3/r/x_foster, 4x foster youth. Best practice is not to flood their sub with questions that you can answer yourself. It is, however, a great place to read up on ex-foster youth experiences. Are all great online resources where you can chat with people who are actively fostering, have fostered, or are looking to foster. Edit 2. I do want to point out that we didn't do any of this alone. We raised considerable amount of money to break our lease because we had just signed a new lease the previous month. We had help from an agency that I was familiar with through work who allowed us to take private keys to meet our licensing requirements. We had the support of our friends in California who helped us move and provided us with emotional support all along the way. We didn't do any of the above alone because we couldn't have. I adopted a 15-year-old. He was hell on wheels and made a lot of really poor choices. He's now 20 and I am so proud of the man he became. It was a horrible time trying to get him to understand that abuse isn't love and that we wanted the best for him, but he's doing great now and is working really hard to create a loving family of his own. Do I suggest adopting older kids? Hell yes. The biggest reason is because I grew up in foster care. All I wanted was my own family. It's hard, it's taxing, and you have a lot of rewiring to treat their hurts and make them better so they know you're not going to do the same to them. But every minute is worth it. I'm 24 now, but I was taken into foster care when I was 5 and put into the adoption process twice. I lived in over 7 homes before I was finally adopted for real. I'm your textbook example of a nightmare child. The first time I was put up for adoption though was when I was ***********. At this time, I had bladder and bowel control issues on a regular basis. I couldn't read or write. I had cataracts in both eyes and needed a custom prescription to see anything. I had extreme anger issues that I would usually relieve by hitting walls, things, or myself. People could provoke me into being aggressive to them, but I never just attacked people out of the blue. Some of the worst things I did were pushing a kid on the stairs, fighting with a kid in the pool, punching a girl, throwing rocks at kids, and unfortunately more. I needed a variety of medications to deal with all of these things, as well as regular therapeutic visits. The family that took me in was ridiculously well off, like they had live-in staff in their mansion. But they stopped giving me my medicine or taking me to appointments as they didn't believe people should rely on pills. Nor did I see a therapist or a counselor of any kind during this time. About a few months of dealing with deeply troubled 7-year-old me, the family accused me of keeping a kitchen knife underneath my pillow and had me returned to the system that same day. As far as I'm concerned, I never touched a knife while I lived in their house. I remember enjoying my time with the family. They even took me with them to Peru. I can only own that because I was a difficult child. This family was willing to write me off as a lost cause and move on to their next potential kid. After about another 6 months in the foster care system, a woman who had previously stepped up as my guardian ad litem to represent my best interests in court took me into her home. I still had the same issues, but instead of leaving me to my own devices, this family invested time, care, and love into helping me grow up. They adopted me a year later and continued to put in the hard work and the resources needed for me to have the stability and support I needed. They are my mom and my dad now. 15 years later, I haven't been in a fight or physically aggressive with anyone in almost a decade. I'm finally finishing up my undergraduate degree and getting ready to apply to law schools. I'd like to work in immigration or civil rights law. I'd like to think I've grown into a caring and empathetic member of the community with a very unique background that, thank God, most people don't have to go through. Older kids are usually difficult to raise, and any parent looking to adopt a child older than an infant should keep this in mind. In our birth families, we all had to deal with abuse and/or neglect. In the foster care system, we often had to deal with the same abuse and/or neglect, but now there was also the ever-present uncertainty of if we'd be living with strangers the next day because the current home gave us back. In my case with my first adoption process, even a smart, successful, hard-working family was woefully unprepared to handle me, so they gave me back. The family that was able to successfully get through adopting me and raising me were literally experts on child welfare and abuse, and had already had the experience of raising multiple children before me. The other thing I'll say about older kids is lack of knowledge of family medical history can really end up being a problem. I've needed medication, human growth hormones, a year-long medical diagnostic quest into figuring out why I would faint regularly, a problem that actually resolved itself. Cataract surgery, a diagnosis of celiac disease. I've also been left largely on my own to understand my mental health, the anxiety, depression, insomnia, substance abuse, etc. In the end, there isn't anything in the world I wouldn't do for my mom and dad. They saved my life. Long story inbound, I'm going to cut it down as much as I can. My wife and I are a little older, so when we decided to adopt we opted for an older child for a host of reasons. One being it made more sense for us financially. Healthy infant adoptions are crazy expensive for average people like us, plus the long waits, etc. And also because our hearts went out for older children whom society generally wants to look over and forget. These kids need a home too. We chose to adopt from the foster care system. This meant taking the same set of cleas as standard aspiring foster parents. So even though we had no intention of becoming actual foster parents, we learned what they learn and became legitimate foster parents. We took in a troubled 13-year-old girl. I won't tell her personal story of how she got into the system, except to say it was not as one might expect. We stuck through it with her. There were lots of twists and turns in her story, and we found out the hard way that she was not, in fact, clear for adoption months into the process. So we became what we wanted to avoid, foster parents instead of adoptive parents. I'll never forget during one of the regularly scheduled court appearances we were obligated to go to, of having the court workers review her story to the court and later having random people sob in the back from listening to it and tell us we will pray for you. She was angry at the world for her situation, angry at her bio mom for abandoning her, angry at the system for forgetting her for so many years. She lashed out at us many times as well, thinking we would just give up on her. I'll never forget her slamming the door to her room and screaming at my wife, "I hate you," over and over, and my wife barely holding it together and saying "I love you" anyway each time. My wife and I had moments of despair when one of us would grow weak and say we couldn't do this anymore and maybe we should consider giving up. The other would remind us, well, what would we do in this situation if she were *oh you are *child, and we would nod and press on. One day, about a year and a half in, this child turned to me while I was driving her somewhere and said, "I don't want to go back to my bio mom. I want you. I want you to be my dad." And I, a grown man, broke down and wept. The adoption went final when she was 15. Yes, it was that long of a process, but the actual adoption took all of 5 minutes in a judge's chamber, for which this girl quipped, "That's it? Just the stroke of a pen. Hell, I'd have lent you a pen years ago." People who didn't know us back then honestly are surprised to learn she was adopted. She's an honor graduate from high school now and is planning to attend college in the fall for nursing. We couldn't be more proud of this child, our daughter. /edit. It seems I made a lot of people cry. I still get a lump in my throat and moist-eyed every time I talk about the day she asked me to be her father. Even now, 5 years on, I share this story every chance I get because it is my sincerest hope that maybe I'll move even one person or couple to consider adopting an older child, or maybe at least help in other ways such as donating clothes/toys/etc. These kids move from home to home so much that in many cases all they have is a clothes on their back and maybe a knick-knack or two. Our child had a single suitcase's worth of loose ill-fitting clothes, some books, and a single photograph of herself as a baby that she kept in her sock everywhere she went in case she had to leave without her suitcase. Close bracket. I'll never forget her slamming the door to her room and screaming at my wife, "I hate you," over and over, and my wife barely holding it together and saying "I love you" anyway each time. This is making me weep a bunch. I'm really glad you and your wife were there for her and each other. Thanks for doing what you do. We adopted our eldest daughter at 10. We actually adopted her baby half-sister first. After the mom met us, since we were doing this via foster care, she asked if we'd adopt her other daughter too. She had been in and out of foster care most of her life, and her bio mom selflessly made the decision to let her go for stability and safety. We definitely weren't planning to adopt an older child. We already had a 6-year-old biological child, but after meeting the 10-year-old, we knew we'd want her to be a part of our family. It's been 16 years and it definitely hasn't always been easy, but we have no regrets. We love our daughter like our own. She was challenging to raise the first few years, definitely had some trust issues with us, and some deep-seated abandonment issues. Family therapy helped. Every once in a while, like once every few years or so, these issues resurface. She still struggles with depression and anxiety. I'd be lying if I said this doesn't worry me, it does, but she seems to have a handle on it. She's always been incredibly smart and talented. She just finished her master's degree, has had a successful career thus far, and she's engaged to a wonderful man. They were supposed to get married this summer. Now we aren't sure. Thanks COVID. It's almost odd that she has really excelled in everything she's ever tried. She thinks it's mostly due to good luck. We call her, half jokingly, our achiever. Some of her success was due to our parenting, I'm sure, but most of it is just her and how she's wired. I'm proud to be her mom. That's wonderful. I'm so happy to hear everything went well. I'm asking because I adopted my daughter when she was age 10. It was pure hell to begin with as it was not shared with us. She had serious psychological issues. After 7 years of therapy and many tears, we had a breakthrough. Now 27 years later, I was asked if I recommended doing it. I was at a loss if I should have been honest or just say yes, because once you get past the issues that will surely arise, it's a wonderful thing to do. Yeah, be honest. So, if those parents adopt a child that needs help, they can get it sooner. We adopted a 15-year-old girl after raising 3 bio kids to adulthood. It has been good, but quite different from what we expected. 15-year-olds are not fully formed but almost. She is a nice smart kid, but also got pregnant, hid it for 4 months, had a beautiful baby. We expected to finish high school and hold down a part-time job, save some money which she would need to become independent after graduation. Her goal, she moved 1,000 miles away, took up with kind of a rough crowd, was immersed in a druggy thiefy homeless group that made her fear that her son would end up removed and back in the foster care system. For now the baby is with us. Almost 2 babies are a lot of work, but also a lot of joy and laughter. We are about 60. Occasionally I think this is not what we signed up for, but in reality it is exactly what we signed up for. Most folks when they have a kid or multiple kids have a bunch of expectations. Part of what makes it interesting is that the kids come with their own personalities, software, journeys, whatever you want to call it. Can make for a wild interesting 20 years. My parents adopted 3 older children over the years, a 6-year-old girl, then a 13-year-old boy and 16-year-old girl. They had a very similar outcome with my oldest sister. It just took longer to happen. My parents had recently become empty nesters after having 3 adopted and 1 biological child and were looking forward to it. None of the adoptions were a positive experience for anyone, despite my parents doing everything in their power to help their kids. They were relieved to move forward. They found out she was pregnant a year after she had run away and moved to another city. She was 20 and wanted to be a mom, so they supported her in every way imaginable, paid for an apartment, all of the baby stuff, eventually let her move back in when she was struggling being on her own. A few weeks after having the baby she took off again, told my parents she didn't want to be a mom right now and have them guardianship. They didn't want another kid, but there wasn't much of a choice. They weren't going to let him go into the system. We didn't see her or hear from her for over a year. At that point she contacted them and said she wanted to have them officially adopt him. He's 8 now, and they love him dearly. But I would be lying if I said I didn't wish things had gone differently. I hope that things work out for you guys. That baby is lucky to have you 3. Teen years were rough. It's hard to be a kid again after having to parent yourself and younger siblings. But now that she is an adult, things are better and calmer for us all. I would 100% recommend it. Even with the struggle, my child is a huge blessing and I can't imagine life without her in it. She is one of the strongest people I know. Wow. Thanks so much for both being aware of this and bringing this to light. I went into foster at age 13 and suddenly having food all the time, a safe place to live, all the school supplies I needed. It really did a number on me for a while. Mostly because the other kids, brothers, nieces, were still in the bad home, and I spent almost every night worrying about them, knowing they were hungry while I was eating 3 meals a day. It really ducked me up for a while. I ended up with bulimia not because of my weight, but just because I'd eat so much and then feel like absolute shiz about it. Just tons of guilt. I eventually worked it out, but it took a long time before I began feeling like an actual teenager, and honestly, I'm not sure I ever got there all the way. It's weird being responsible for an entire household and then suddenly, you're a kid. Even though you have all the normal kid stuff, you still feel completely alienated from your peers, your new family. I'm not sure my guardians ever really understood, and I think they mistook all my conflict for a lack of gratitude, and that kind of eats me up, till this day. Throwaway because this is personal. I've been a foster parent for 4 years, have fostered birth to 15, about 20 kids total, and I've worked as an advocate for foster/adoptive parents for 2. I adopted my son last year, after he had been with me for almost a year in foster care. He was 5, so still pretty young. He is autistic and nonverbal. His mom has severe mental health issues, and he had been homeless his whole life before coming into care. He was wandering the street in a diaper and nothing else in November when he was found by police. I've never regretted adopting him for a second. He's wonderful. He's ridiculously bright and funny and sweet. I love him more than I knew I could love anyone. We have many difficult days or weeks. I gave up a lot of things to be his dad. I'm only 27. It's hard to find a sitter for him. His daycare keeps him in the baby room. He can't always go out to the store or anywhere loud/crowded, etc. But I adjusted, and I don't regret it. From my work side, I can say I have encountered many adoptive parents who regret adopting. Usually these are folks who adopted little ones, like birth to 2, and when those kids start exhibiting big behaviors, having trouble in school, needing psych hospitalization, getting involved with juvenile justice, that's when they call me and ask how to give them back. Sick. There are no giverbacks unless you're willing to accept criminal charges. Edit. This is not true for all places. Some places have civil charges and some have nothing. I often see people say they want to foster teens, which is amazing, and I will never get in the way of that because it is so needed. I want those people to talk to people who foster teens before they do it. It's very hard. Not just hard like remodeling your bathroom or getting a work project done. There's no finish line. It's always a struggle. There are lots of good days and happy times, and it is worth it. But people who talk about their kids going on to law school or even college, in my experience, are the minority. Kids with trauma often need lifelong support. That means when they're 20, 25, you're still lending them money or driving them to rehab or dispensing medication. And if they have kids, they may not be able to parent appropriately without a lot of help. I know lots of adoptive parents now raising their grandkids as well. TL. Doctor, fostering is very hard and not for everyone, but it is worth it. PS I'm happy to answer questions anytime. Edit. I was thinking about this because it's 5 AM and my son is doing gymnastics in his room, and I wanted to clarify. People who call me to give their kids back aren't bad people. They're tired, burnt out, hopeless, scared, and desperate. Often there are other kids in the home who are being affected. You really don't meet a lot truly bad people who adopt from foster care. Edit 2. Okay, wow, this got a lot of attention. I'll try to answer the questions, but TBH it's a little overwhelming, so don't be offended if I don't answer you. Also, I'm not a lawyer, just a regular dude who works in the system. If you want to look into fostering, Google your region plus foster care licensing. It's different in every county, state, and country, so if I don't know where you live I can't give you specifics. But good luck. Usually these are folks who adopted little ones, like birth to 2, and when those kids start exhibiting big behaviors, having trouble in school, needing psych hospitalization, getting involved with juvenile justice, a lot of people don't realize how much early childhood trauma can affect a person. Just because you don't remember an event doesn't mean it didn't leave an impression in your life. Additionally, early trauma can cause earlier memories than average. Removed. My husband and I adopted my brother's 2 kids, at the time 2 meters and 6F, and their sister, 4F. Our oldest was violent and abusive, to herself and toward me. She never acted out that way around my husband, which always made me feel as though I was doing something wrong. Maybe we weren't a good fit. Maybe I was too young. Maybe she was better off with her foster family. I would spend every night in tears, fearful that we were doing more harm than good, because she never acted out that way before adoption. She was reading by 3, eating up chapter books, before we could introduce them properly. We thought she was memorizing street names. Nope. She read them faster than we could most times. She was, and still is, a brilliant young lady that shocks people when she speaks. But those fits. It took our dog almost a year to really trust her. At one point she kicked me so hard in the mouth I thought I had lost teeth. Therapy and counseling helped more than I can even say, for both of us. Her therapist reminded me that she was hurt by her mother and never knew her father enough to not trust him. She was throwing knives metaphorically, of course, haha, because she had never really trusted women before. She was wary, and rightfully so. We both worked so hard to develop a healthy relationship, and honestly we are still putting ours into it. She's almost 10, and honestly just like me. It's odd. It's like we've always been a family, but it didn't always feel that way. Edit, y'all. I woke up to so many beautifully written comments. I can't even begin to thank everyone for their kind words. 3. I just got done making my kids French toast and made sure to love on them extra when they were done eating. They're my absolute world, and I'm so very glad for all of your support. I hope everyone has a fantastic day, be safe, and don't forget to remind your kids how much they mean to you. 3. Also, to clarify, their birth mom was almost completely deaf. She always had the TV on for the kids with subtitles, so our oldest was reading by a very young age. Our youngest had never been taken out of his car seat, so when he came to us the back of his head was completely flat. He was non-verbal until he was about 3 and would get upset that we couldn't understand him. He and our middle daughter, from another biodad, were home together, so their bond was very strong. Even though she isn't biologically related to me, she's still their sister and we couldn't imagine separating them. All 3 are doing spectacularly well in school, and any delays we thought we would need to address before have completely disappeared. I couldn't be more proud of our little clan. 3. Oh man, she sounds like me. ADHD plus HYPERLEXIA plus RSD. Couldn't explain why I was angry all the time until I got diagnosed with ADHD and learned about its comorbidities. I fostered 7 and adopted 2, all girls. I got them between the ages of 12 to 15. I took that age because they were hard to place and I knew they were coming with loads of issues. My second to youngest had been part of a child pornography ring run by her parents. She was my biggest challenge and still is. She is the human embodiment of EIOR. She made it through college, got her law degree, passed the bar and self-commits at least once a year. She's schizophrenic and still suicidal. One of my middle girls was severely beaten by alcoholic parents, and she has a slight drinking problem and thinks nothing of swatting her kids. She knows if I see one mark on them, or if them say anything I will take them. The others have mostly self-esteem issues. They are all grown now. I'd do it all again. These are my kids and I love them. I also had one biological daughter and a stepson. The stepson is the only one I regret. It's definitely not for everyone. Edit. Oh wow. Exclamation mark. Thanks everyone for all the awards. I'm blown away. So many responses were so feelings. Thanks everyone for sharing. BTW, I have to share. My youngest found out at 6 AM she got a full ride for her post-secondary degree at Lund University in Sweden. It's amazing what love can do. You sound amazing. The children were very lucky to have you as a mom. I feel I got lucky. He was 9 when we adopted him, but he was just grateful to have a home and people who loved him. My wife and I love him dearly as he does us. Thank you for the silver. This is my first time getting 1/u/Christian who 649 *TWO silvers. Exclamation mark. Thank you/u/exact la curata Joe *. 3 thanks to /u/Hyanothy now. Thank you for this comment. I posted this below, but I want to thank you specifically. It seems like you have a great view of being an adoptive parent. A lot of people in this thread are using hero/savior language, and it really mischaracterizes the parent-child relationship. For anyone wondering why that can be troublesome, here's a blog and quote https that explain it way better than I could. Conversations suggesting I'm a hero for being my son's mom suggests he is more difficult to love or parent than my biological son. It suggests it takes heroic effort to choose to love someone who doesn't share your blood or DNA. We are no saviors. We are parents. Telling an adoptee lucky their parents are heroes implies they should be thankful they were adopted. But what if part of their heart grieves this aspect of their identity? I took guardianship of my son's half-sister when she was 14. Their father, who is not and will never be a part of my son's life, was abusive and tried to molest her once when he was drunk. As a result, she was hypersexual and acted out. Her mother was a pushover who didn't know how to handle her, so she was put into the system. I knew she wasn't a bad kid, so I stepped in and said I'd take her. It was rough that first year. She tested the boundaries a lot until she realized that I wasn't going to give up on her. I think it also helped that her baby brother adored her and my parents welcomed her with open arms. We found her a good therapist that she clicked with and that really helped her work through her issues. She finished school with good grades, met her boyfriend who is wonderful with her. She has kids of her own now and is a fantastic mother. Best decision I ever made was taking her in. I'm glad she's doing so well. It's often hard to understand for foster parents, but if they start acting out it means they are feeling more and more at home. They need to know you will hold on to them unconditionally, and when there's a breakthrough it often goes a lot better. Deleted. My kids are in their 30s. It always baffles me when people say they can't wait until their kids are 18, as if their responsibility and care for their kids magically vanishes at 18. I'm as strongly concerned with my children's happiness and well-being as I was when they were 2. My pre-adoptive son just moved in 6 weeks ago. He's almost 10. Him getting here has been a bit of a long and wild story, but has been in care since he was 6. It hasn't been easy, but there's so many older kids who need families. My biggest thing is just to make damn sure you're committed. Know your limits. Be honest with yourself and your adoption coordinator. And demand honesty from the social worker as well. Ask for psych evals and treatment histories. Because if you convince yourself oh I can handle this, and you change your mind, you are re-traumatizing that child. My son has complex trauma from years of abuse, but the thing he talks about most after his meltdowns? Having to leave his first pre-adoptive home because he kept losing his temper and throwing things. Has been in 4 to 5 placements and a PRTF since then. I work with girls involved in juvenile justice, so I felt uniquely prepared for this situation, and even for me, it's been physically and emotionally exhausting. I'm a single parent, and we're in the middle of a global pandemic, so I'm sure that's a factor. But if you choose to adopt, there shouldn't be any changing your mind or this just isn't working out. That kiddo is part of your family. My son and I have a little mantra together: forever. Even when things get hard, even when things get sad. That's a beautiful mantra. I bet it's a comfort for you both. Thanks for sharing your story. My experience adopting is one of the greatest experiences I could describe to you, and if you want kids, I strongly recommend you look into it. My kids were siblings aged 7, 4, and 6 months, so it was never unknown to them. The BO parents abused them, and things were a bit tough at first, but other than matters of faith, it is the most rewarding thing I've ever done. My oldest is a student at Purdue, and is studying abroad in Ireland right now. My middle daughter will be attending Purdue in the fall. My youngest is learning Japanese in middle school right now, and I suspect she'll go to either IU or Purdue when she graduates high school. #PROUDDAD. Removed. 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 Mine is now 16. I became dad when they were 5. They got drunk tonight on alcohol. They snuck out of a locked room in the basement, screamed at their mother and I for 2 hours, ranted at their younger siblings. Then we called the police to take them to the hospital for their 10th inpatient psych admission and 4th one this year, past 12 months, less than a month after being released from the last one. They were such a happy kid, but the last 6 years have been hell. They swing from being a great smart funny kid with a bright future to rampaging throughout the house at the drop of a hat. There's definitely a mental health issue, but nothing works, and the swings are getting more and more frequent. I worry for them every single day. I love all of my kids. I also can't wait for this specific one to turn 18, when they have announced they're moving to Seattle to live with their boyfriend, because we're just so tired and it doesn't matter how much therapy we pay for and undergo, or how many times they go inpatient. If they'll be happier there, then that's fine by me. Maybe getting out there and failing, God I hope they don't, will make them take recovery and therapy seriously. I'm terrified I'm going to have to bury them, though. It's 4 AM. I have to open my office in 4 hours, and I'm sitting on the couch waiting for my wife to get home from the hospital. Nothing's changing and we're all just so tired. I want you to know that I watched my brother go through alcohol and drug abuse, arrests etc. from ages 13 to 17. He's now doing his masters in chemistry. We joke about how all the acid and pills he took as a teenager was a prerequisite. It took time, but he got there, and has pretty great now. Still has some anger issues, but has still pretty great. Myself, my parents have taken me to hospital for alcohol poisoning and an intentional overdose. That was about 9 years ago. Hang in there. My parents' patience and tolerance and support are pretty much the only reason I'm here. I own that. My brother thinks the same. My husband and I unexpectedly adopted a 17-year-old. She was on drugs and a downhill spiral, so we gave her a place full of love, therapy, help, therapy, rehab, and more therapy with love. She healed and became a part of our family. It is kinda odd being only 9 and 10 years older than your kid, but she is still our kid. Also we are a gay couple, and knew basically next to nothing about females and their monthly needs. She never had a loving and stable household with men that didn't hurt her in emotionally and physical ways. So it was one big old learn process for the 3 of us. But we made it work, and now we are like any other family. I took in a 15-year-old with severe mental health issues. She is 19 now, I'm early 30s. It is funny now, when we go to the pub, and she calls me mum, and my best friends, also female, dad and auntie. People get really confused. We've made our own strange family, haha. Adopted a child who was 11 when I was 21. He was my wife's younger cousin and his household was marred with substance abuse, filth, instability, and mental health issues. Knew it was bad, but didn't know how bad. Took him, 11, and his brother, 14, for a summer once, just to give them a break from what we thought was a dirty house with an overwhelmed parent, until I took them back the week before school started and saw the filth firsthand, the smell and the random people coming in / out, the wreckage we were about to have to leave. The fact that in this time his barks and games I had hand me down at him has been sold along with their TV. The 2 had one mattress on a floor and the younger one said I can't wait for school to start back. And when I asked why, he said because then I get to eat every day, like when I'm at your house. I told them to just get back in the car. His mother never even called to ask why he or his brother didn't come home until tax season, to make sure we didn't claim them on our taxes, etc. Never wished him a happy birthday, Christmas, nothing. My wife and I grew up very quickly. We worked hard and got full custody about a year later. When he was 12, he grew up healthy and happy, successful with great grades and a good head on his shoulders. His brother who was 14 lived with us for the first year, then would go back and forth trying to help his mom get a life together before returning again, but for the most part during those years, the younger child we had full custody of, and the older child came/went as he needed. It wasn't until years later when the younger of the two moved out with his friends, instead of taking our offer to go to college right after school, and began having substance abuse issues of his own, that we learned the extent of the abuse he had endured at home for nearly his entire childhood and kept inside, sexual and physical, 4 years starting when he was about 5 from his mother's friends and boyfriends and even a family member due to their terrible situation. It was heartbreaking. He ended up going through a pretty severe addiction period in his early to mid 20s, and regardless what we've tried and how many small successes we've worked with him to reach, he always ends up in a severe depression and turning back to drugs again. The last time I talked to him, about a week ago, I told him I loved him and would help him get into a very nice rehab community when he's ready, and help him get a good job and place for himself, but only when he's ready to be clean, and until then, we simply can't do anything with/for him. And it was hard to do. I'm in the second half of my 30s now, have 3 children in grad school who need me, like he did then, who also love him. Our oldest looks at him like a big brother, but unfortunately we have to keep our distance a bit, so they don't have to see close up the ugly side of addiction in someone they love. Now that he's an adult in his mid-20s himself making these choices, we can't have any real relationship other than the occasional call or letter until he's done. He loves them too, but he's got some demons that we cannot possibly understand, and until he's ready to get help for them, or help for his addiction, we don't have much of a relationship. His brother worked hard and straightened their mother out over the years into a functioning adult, and mother got her life together, a job, a place, everything, and as adults, never left her. In fact, due to him, his brother spent the last year of his teens sharing our household and hers back/forth, which wouldn't have been possible without him. The older brother and her are roommates now, and we are very proud of him for the man he's become, what he's persevered, and the incredible progress he's made with their mother, and how he's stuck by her side now, providing as equals. I never realized it, but he and I really grew up together, only being 5 to 6 years apart in age, and were best friends 4 years as young adults even after his younger brother moved out. One of my biggest regrets is somehow letting those days end. He loves his brother too, but isn't. His mother's relationship with his brother is the same as ours, the delicate balance between helpful/love vs enabling due to understanding the pain he's probably trying to understand/repress, until he's able to beat this. And he will. Nothing is perfect, just what you make of it, I suppose, but it has highlighted to us how important the early years of a child's development are, and how damaging all forms of abuse can be, regardless how much effort you put into trying to change things afterward. And also how important it is for a child to have an adult who genuinely cares about them, since sadly many don't. Asterisk 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 WOULD. I recommend it. Asterisk asterisk yes. But be honest with yourself why you're doing it, and know what you're getting into. You're not getting a good/bad kid. You're getting an opportunity to be a good/bad parent. Children this age need you as much as a baby does. They bring happiness the same as a baby does, and also present their own unique challenges the same as parents do, which is what they're signing up for too without knowing. And most importantly, asterisk asterisk the reason you should be adopting asterisk asterisk is40hem asterisk asterisk. You get to give your love, time, affection, and a portion of your life and heart to asterisk asterisk WOULD. I do it again. Asterisk asterisk every single time. Thank you for everything y'all done. As a gay couple, my partner and I adopted 2 siblings, aged 9 and 10, both girls. The reality is I love them both, I'm proud of them, they are light of my life, and I regret every decision that I made that resulted in me having them. Children who experience trauma and suffering at a young age can become productive, well-balanced adults. But it's long odds. What do you mean I regret every decision that I made that resulted in me having them? I became dad to a little girl just after her 2nd birthday, legally stepdad just before her 4th, and divorced her mother just after her 7th. But I remained dad, and I do to this day, and she's 21 now. Her mother is a drunk who had 2 more kids later on with an abusive guy, now ex, who is in jail. The whole time my daughter had me to fall back on. I told her the truth at 15, as I know it, about her biological father who has never attempted to contact her. He has at least 2, if not 3 other children. If she wanted to seek him out, I told her I would help her. Also that she needed to be aware at any time he, or those other siblings, could seek her out. She looked me in the eye and said, "No, you're my dad." That's all I want to know. Edit. Thank you for all the upvotes, and even my first Reddit awards. I just want to add, thanks to her home family situation at her mother's, she's been eligible for government benefits and assistance through university. She will soon graduate as a paramedic. She'd never have got those benefits if she was living with me full time, or if I had adopted her. Her bio father had child support extracted until she was 18. I didn't, but she never went without. Her mother's ex, although he was abusive to her mother, kept a roof over my daughter's head and food on the table before he got locked up. I never had personal issue with him. But once she's graduated and no longer eligible for benefits, she wants to do an intra-family adoption. I think that's what it's called, and she will adopt me as her dad legally. This story warms my heart. I can tell that you're truly an exceptional father. Removed. My wife and I adopted an older girl from our state's foster system. The girl was 13 when we adopted her, and we were told she had a rough childhood full of abuse, and she had been diagnosed with general mood disorder. Little did we know that the psychological assessment was done by an unqualified state doctor, and this little girl had severe issues that required more care than my wife and I were prepared for. We spent 5 years dealing with fighting, arguing, runaway attempts, drug use, alcohol abuse, constant emotional manipulation, constant lying, stealing, etc. She was also in constant contact with her schizophrenic birth mother behind our backs. The woman kept feeding our daughter conspiracy theories and lies and constantly making the situation worse for all of us. We tried the best we could for 5 whole years, trying various different therapists, trying different parenting methods, seeing different doctors, all to no avail. It wasn't until about 5 months before her 18th birthday that we had to have her committed, and we finally got a proper diagnosis. She was diagnosed with bipolar and BPD, and we finally had an answer to the years of hell we all had to go through. We did our research and learned the proper way to parent a child with these conditions, and things began to improve over the last few months she was with us. But on her 18th birthday she bailed, and we haven't seen her since. That was 5 years ago. I'm so sorry. You guys really did try, and that matters a lot more than you think. My daughter is of a different race, so it was never something we could have hidden if we wanted to. We made a picture book that tells the whole story of her adoption, the trip to China and back, etc. Before she could even speak, we made that part of what we told her. At least once a week we did that as a bedtime story, and continued for many years. It wasn't until age 11 that she really started having some serious questions about abandonment by her birth mom, etc. But it wasn't a total shock, because we had introduced a lot of it earlier. I think this is important. I did not grow up with my biomom, and I've known since I was 4 or 5. My mother told me young because she knew people can be cruel, and she didn't want me to find out from anyone else. Which is exactly what almost happened. Within the month some cousin maliciously told me I was adopted. Growing up with the knowledge, I never resented my adopted mom, but I did have some issues about not being good enough, since my biomom had 4 kids after me and kept 3 of them. We fostered 26 since the 70s. We only took troubled boys, and I have 3 biological boys. We have had fist fights you wouldn't believe, and these have been whooped on both sides, but when they have a common task they get it done. I own a farm, so there is always work. As the boys got older they realized it wasn't so bad, and told the younger ones to behave. Now I have sons in military, law enforcement and academics, and I would take a bullet for any of them. In fact, we just got out final child. She's 15 and wants to be a veterinarian. We keep her plenty busy, and besides wearing my Bobby or jersey I think we'll keep her. What made you decide to switch from fostering/adopting only troubled boys to at least one girl? Removed. We adopted a 5-year-old girl. She's now 12. Don't regret it at all. But it has been extremely hard. She has been diagnosed with PTSD, reactive attachment disorder, and most recently bipolar disorder. She has been in therapy since we adopted her. Much has improved, but she still has extreme anger issues. She has run away from home 3 times. She has been in patient psych twice. Her school has reported us to the HR. When she gets out of control, we have to restrain her to prevent her from hurting herself or us. She told her teacher about an incident when we had to restrain her, so they reported it, and a social worker showed up at our door that night. I won't recommend adopting an older child to someone unless I know they are willing to put in the work. Love doesn't cure all. What's DHR? That aside, I can tell that you do love her a lot and that you are desperately doing whatever you can to help her in any way possible. Thank you for being a good person and a good parent. Removed. I adopted a 7-year-old from foster care in 2017. It was an absolute failure. My wife pushed me to choose this child, even though I didn't feel the sparks everyone talks about when meeting or hearing about their kids. He has a background of being sexually predatory, and it's triggering for me as a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. I separated from my wife in 2018, and we shared custody for about a year. I asked her for a short break, and she took the child and never returned him. I can't say I'm unhappy about her choice. I didn't really fight for her to bring him back. I have seen him only a few times since then. I care for him as a human being, and of course wish no harm upon him, but I'm not his parent. It's one of the most difficult things I've been through. Was the separation heavily influenced by him, or for separate reasons? She, Asian, became my daughter when she was 6, about the same age as my biological, European, daughter. She has been diligent all her life. It was often difficult to get her to show emotions, but she just kept going, worked hard at school, just by sheer persistence. She got a very good university degree and married a great guy. She insisted to keep her maiden, my name, because it was so difficult to get that name. Still not showing many emotions, just it in her head. She is my daughter, exactly like my biological kids. I love her to bits. I'm so proud of her. Just praying that life will not throw her a curveball, but I suppose every parent does that. Removed. Removed. I adopted an older child, and the only part 1 regret was agreeing to an open adoption with the birth parents, separate biannual visits with BO mom and BO dad. Each and every visit was sheer hell on earth, from the build up to the fallout after. I regret nothing about adopting an older child and would do it again in a heartbeat, but I would do a closed adoption. Can I ask why the BO parent visits are hellish? I'm from the other side of this question. I was adopted when I was 5 by a couple of narcissists that adopted children so they could say they did. I was a pretty screwed up kid even by then. They were obviously told that. Both being masters plus degree teachers were determined to fix me. So I got these people in my life that expected adult behavior and decisions from a child. I was slightly physically abused and just wrecked emotionally the entire time. No affection was ever displayed. Their favorite line was, "We put food on the table and a roof overhead, what more could you want?" There was never any type of teaching of life skills like money handling or goal setting. Looking back now, negative feedback was the only way I learned anything. My dad made it clear that I would join the army hour of high school. I did, and it was the worst thing I could have done as a screwed up young adult. So just consider what your real motivation is behind adopting kids. Are you trying to give them a better life? Or are you just wanting something more complex than your cat to post on Facebook? My wife and I adopted a 16-year-old boy over a year ago. We originally went in thinking we are going to adopt much younger, but when we started reviewing profiles there were a large number of teenagers in the mix. Most people adopting children are looking for the full parental experience. For some, adoption is their only chance at raising a child, so I can kind of understand the desire to adopt a young child. The result is that the older children are skipped over. It's heartbreaking, as many unadopted kids exit the system at 18 and almost all of their supports disappear. We kept running into these profiles, and it was impossible to ignore them. We were adopting to expand our family, already having kids of our own, so parenting wasn't new to us. He's been a great addition and has blended really well. How old are your bio kids? We have 2 small kids, 1 and 3, and are looking into adopting a kid older than them. Some people don't recommend adopting out of birth order, but we're convinced it would work for us, and that age isn't important, but the kids themselves. I have adopted 6 kids, 4 were between 7 and 13, a sibling set, and then to that were younger, 3 and 5, a different sibling set. It has gone mostly well. There has been a lot of therapy and issues due to past abuse. The hardest part has been learning how to redefine what it means to be a successful parent. It is also challenging discovering deficiencies in their upbringing. I did learn how to do creative parenting. Reading through this thread, people who adopted siblings generally had a better time. Do you think that the support they give each other is part of that? In my family situation, I wish we hadn't. My father was the baseball coach and this boy and my brother were friends on the team. This boy was from a terrible family and was getting into trouble a lot. My father wanted to help. My parents decided that they would foster him and possibly work towards adopting. Well, he was 4 years older than me and he started molesting me almost immediately. At first I found it fun. He was cute and the older boy. I had never had anyone interested in me like that before. But then he started to do things that I didn't understand sexually. I'd try to get him to stop, but he would hit me and mentally abuse me. It was awful. I felt I couldn't say anything because he was terrifying, and I also felt responsible for allowing it to happen and enjoying it at first. He was my first crush and kiss. It was a really confusing time. He ended up spiraling out and became very violent. My parents decided he was becoming too dangerous to be in our home and ended the fostering. They never found out about what he was doing to me until a decade later. So I think each situation is certainly unique. This kid was unfortunately broken and wanted to break everything within his path. If you do decide to adopt and you have other children in your home, make them a part of the decision. Have open communication about what is and what isn't acceptable. My parents had great intentions, and I don't blame them in any way, but I'll be damned if I would allow an outside source like that to penetrate my home again. I'm so sorry you had to go through something like that. 3. Removed. 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 Deleted. I would suggest changing your approach. They're acting out, and you're trying too hard in a sense, and they continue to act out because they know it bothers you. They are testing you and they're winning. Let them make their own food. Provide all the ingredients, as well as cereal, snacks, frozen foods they can easily do themselves. Or cook for everyone, put it on the table. Say it's available if they want. If not, totally cool. Put it in the fridge, and you now have leftovers. Stop asking them to take care of the dog. It's your dog in their mind. Just take care of it yourself. Plus, walking your dog and feeding him would probably bring you joy right now. Give them some space and let them be, and you'll see they'll start coming to you all of a sudden, wanting your food, etc. Removed. I'm late to the game, but feel obligated to comment because I have a lot of experience with adoption and this question in particular. I'm a 46-year-old father of 5. Ages range from 22 to 10. My 2 oldest, by birth, are 22 and 19. The 3 youngest are adopted internationally. We adopted my 16-year-old daughter when she was just a few weeks old. You would think this is so young that attachment would not be an issue. That is incorrect. We spent the first several nights getting no sleep. We could not console our daughter until one night, out of frustration, we fed her, put her down in her crib, and left the room. She went from wailing/crying to completely calm and went right to sleep. In the first few weeks in the orphanage, the routine was to feed the babies, put them to bed, and leave them for 4 hours until the night feeding. No comforting or holding. No exceptions. This was already imprinted by the time she came to us. She never got over it. It was actually nice for our sleep patterns, but night bonding is an important part of attachment. A few years later we adopted 2 more children, siblings, ages 5 and 1. These children had spent their entire lives in extreme poverty. The older child had experienced severe abuse. His body is covered in scars. He was malnourished, had parasites, and fungal infections. We were highly educated and warned about the challenges of adopting an older child. We were warned about the tantrums, physical aggression, poop on the walls. We could have not been more prepared. Regardless, we have spent the last 9 years treating our son's physical and mental trauma. It has completely consumed and transformed our family. The anxiety and stress was, and continues to impact our family every day. The aggression and constant attention-seeking behavior has changed both my wife and I. We are different people, and not for the better. All of our children experienced a serious reduction in attention. Their lives are worse off for the decision we have made. To this day, it is a struggle. While our son has made tremendous progress and is now in a mainstream school and just now able to establish a semblance of a normal life as a 14-year-old boy, he will struggle his entire life. However, if we had not adopted him, it very likely would have been worse, or he might be dead. We also have many friends who have adopted older children, 5 and up, although in reality any child over 1 can be considered older when it comes to attachment concerns. Many of these families have experienced similar struggles. Any child coming from a trauma background is likely to exhibit behaviors and concerns as a result of that trauma. Many of these adoptions lead to disruptions to the adoption. Several of these children did not become successful adults. One of these children died of an overdose. In fact, in our circle, it is the exception for these children to become fully functional, successful, happy adults. Moral of the story: no matter how educated you think you are, and how patient and caring you believe yourself to be, the emotional impact of trying to parent a child who had been abused and/or did not receive the care and attention they deserve will make you second guess your decision. You will not be, and cannot be, prepared for how this impacts you and your family. Only people who have this same experience will understand you. Normal parents will think you are exaggerating, and some will not want to interact with you anymore. Be prepared for that. Do I regret our path? Not one bit. We love all of our children. We work every day to make them into functioning adults. Our wish is for them to be happy. We are getting there, I think. But it has been a struggle. P.S. Watch the movie Lion. There are 2 kids in that family. The happy main character is not what you are likely to get. Pay attention to the other kid, the one who struggles. Pay attention to how that child impacts that family. Pay attention to what it does to the mother and how she transforms throughout the movie. That is a pretty damn good representation of what we have been through. I'm a pretty manly man. I was bawling in that movie, in the theater. This was probably the most helpful response I've read. My wife and I are well educated, and I have done a lot of reading and preparation before we make the decision, and I felt like maybe I was more ready than most people. But reading your experience humbled me a lot. Removed. My wife and I took in a 17-year-old 4 months after we got married at 24 and 27. 2 years in, we are very happy with our decision. We walked her through everything: learning to drive, getting her first bank account, getting enrolled in college, the death of her father and mother, getting counseling, estate planning, taxes, and numerous health issues. It has been worth every minute and dollar we have spent to know we have gained a daughter and changed what life will look like for her and generations to follow. I took in my now son when he was 8, my daughter, his big sister, a few years later at 14. We went into the situation looking for a newborn and were asked to respite the boy for a few weeks, just until a bed at the local teen ranch opened up. We've been through tantrums, years of rage, suicide attempts, drug troubles, the works. But getting to watch these kids go from psychotic depressed cast-offs to actual human adults is the proudest accomplishment of my life. She's gone from a self-harming and constantly depressed girl that I wasn't sure would live very long to a bright and hilarious girl who's prepare for her first semester of college. Has gone through a similarly dramatic change. If you can take that first long period of acting out and drama, then I'd strongly recommend it. I have fostered 7 children from ages 4, 16. We just adopted our 11-year-old boy a few months ago. He is sweet, tender-hearted, and creative. He gives the best hugs and loves being our child so much that he says he wishes he could be born all over again as our child. He is overly sensitive, shuts down very easily, and prone to fits of rage. He has deep abandonment fears, a severe reading disability, PTSD, OT, and ADHD. He is a constant roller coaster of moodiness. He is not an easy kid and sometimes he really frustrates us. But he's our kid, forever, and we don't regret our decision. In fact, we are looking forward to adopting another child next year, as well. There is no blanket recommendation anyone could give on whether or not you should adopt an older child. It depends on the individual match between you and a specific child. We were presented with several children we knew would not be a good fit in our family for one reason or another. But along came our boy, and he was everything we wanted, diagnosis and all. He's our perfect, beautiful, broken mess. See, my husband and I feel specifically called to parent children with mental illness. It's a privilege to be his mother and to have the opportunity to walk so closely with someone on their road to healing. We have a heart for older kids. Our easiest kids were actually our 14 and 16-year-olds. Our most difficult child was a 7-year-old girl who attempted suicide in front of me. But keep in mind, every child who is adopted, even the sweetest babies, have experienced trauma. Even separating from the birth family is trauma. And sometimes they have been exposed to drugs or are predisposed to mental illness too. I'd love to be a voice that ends the stigma around adopting older kids. It's not about age, it's about the child. We couldn't do it without support. We have a church that is very supportive of adoptive families. Our families don't care that our child is a different race. They love him regardless. We are part of support groups on Facebook. We take training classes and read parenting books. I'd highly recommend anyone who wants to adopt to read The Connected Child by Karen Purvis to understand what kind of parenting kids from hard places need. I don't regret it, and I do recommend other parents look into older children. There are an abundance of children who need loving parents. We adopted 2 siblings and we also have 2 biological children. Our biological children were 9 and 7 when we adopted our 5 and 4-year-old children. That was 11 years ago. Best advice: embrace an open adoption, but adopted parents fully control any contact. Our kid's biological mother has been a huge help in counseling our kids. They misremembered so many details about how and why we adopted them that lead to blame against us and challenges in our relationship. They have a fierce loyalty to their biological mom that's decreased over time as she's openly reminded them how unfit she was. It wasn't a cakewalk, but we are all much better off than we were when we stumbled into this. I love you for this. I had a boy 20 years ago and did open adoption. He loves his life and has many siblings, foster and otherwise, but he was the first one fostered and right from birth. I saw that they were the right parents and asked them to adopt him, and they were thrilled. I already knew I was unfit and lacked support. I already had cared for many younger siblings by then and knew it wasn't a fairy tale. We both deserved a childhood and parents like you did that for us. Removed. Not the parent, but the child. A bit of a different story. When I was 5, a foster family took me in. They had 2 slightly older adopted children in the home. One had adopted when he was a newborn, the other when she was about 2. I was their first foster child, and then they got into the swing of things and fostered a few more. From the time they got me until I was 5, it was a court case to determine who of my bio family would get me, and in the end it was neither, and I would stay in the foster home. I can detail that, but it's less relevant. It was a rough couple years which I have memories of still, over 2 decades later. Then when I was 6, my foster parents started the adoption proceedings, and they completed when I was 8. Because they had me from a young age, you think that we'd still have a bond. But at multiple times during my adolescence my mother, adoptive, told me that, because I'd been adopted at such an older age, she'd never love me as much as the older ones, never have that sort of bond. I argued that she still got me at 5, which was around the same age as the older adopted sister, but my mother still argued that it wasn't the same. I would always be lesser. There is so much more to the story than that, but apparently there are people out there that love to their children is conditional upon when they got them. If that's you, either A, reconsider when you get the kid, or B, never tell the kid that you love them less than everyone else for something they had no control over. I was never a bad kid, great student, helpful / did everything at home, literally was called the other mother in the home, since I helped raise other kids, but nothing was ever enough. I'm so sorry to hear that. What a horrible, hateful thing to say to a child. You are wonderful and the world needs you. I'm sure you will be an amazing, caring, compassionate parent someday, if that's what you want. I hope you have surrounded yourself with people who love you unconditionally. Removed. We adopted a sibling group of 5. They were 12, 10, 9, 8, and 3. We are only 5 years in, and the first 2 years were just pure chaos. It's like a cycle of trial and error as well as them testing us. Each child is growing at their own rate and making great progress and healing. OMG, that's something. Can you give some more details? For example, where do you live, approximately? How old are you both? What kind of jobs do you have? How is support from the state for these situations? And mostly, how did you get to this decision? Edit: jobs, not hobbies. Removed. My kids were removed from their parents' care and placed with my in-laws as part of a familial care placement at the ages of 7 and 9. My wife and I started caring for them 3 months after that. We were granted legal guardianship about 16 months after the placement. In November of last year we were finally able to adopt them. Coming from someone who never wanted kids, it has honestly been fulfilling to see the huge leaps and bounds these two have taken. The youngest, when placed with us at age 7, had never been to school, couldn't read, didn't know shapes or colors, and still talked like a toddler. Just a few years down the road and now she is the top of her class, and we couldn't be more proud. When they were removed from BO parents, the youngest had lice so bad you couldn't run a brush through her hair, they slept on a mattress in the middle of the floor with no water or electric in the house, and they survived eating nothing but ramen noodles. I didn't adopt, but did foster one of my 15-year-old students. It was a hell I was not prepared for. It didn't help that I was only 25. Long story short, she didn't like having rules and decided she wanted to go back to her biological family. She was only with us because she accused her father of raping her, and it was going through the court system. She recanted so she could go back to her house where there weren't as many rules. She wound up pregnant within 6 months by some high school dropout who has either 18 or 19 according to one of her friends I also taught. Once she was back with her family, she wasn't in my school zone anymore, so I didn't see her directly. Some examples of things we dealt with in the 4 months she lived with us. She tried to date / hook up with a 40-year-old married man she met on Facebook. We had to contact the foster agency to alert them to a threat to the child, and contacted him to let him know if he ever contacted her again we would call the police. She did not like that. She wrote all over her room and random obscure places that she wanted to kill my wife. Didn't act on it, but was threatening. Attempting to sneak out of house to go to things at night. There are other little things that added up. 1 month after being back with her dad, the agency called trying to place her back with us, but we turned it down. I felt terrible about that, and still do sometimes. But I couldn't, but my wife threw it again. We both thought we were doing a bit of God's work. Never have I been so quickly disillusioned. That said, I still believe I did the right thing in trying to bring her in. I just wish I had been successful. We have guardianship over a 15s, fostered him since the age of 12. He is easygoing, kind, and a typical teen in many ways, struggling to find himself, trying new skins, and has attitude when things aren't exactly his way. He also has complex, severe trauma from a horrific abuse history. When we went through guardianship, his caseworker said he had one of the worst backgrounds she'd ever seen in 25 years of foster care. We had no idea when he came to us. The agency said he had no issues whatsoever other than a history of soiling himself. What we found as he grew comfortable and started to trust us is how much more abuse there was, and the last few years have felt overwhelming at times. To get him the care, both physical health and mental, he needs, deal with his often unpredictable triggers, and then deal with our own second-hand trauma when he tells us what he's been through. Second guessing ourselves the whole way, while family and friends ask us if we really want to be doing this. After 3 years we are still dealing with him soiling and his defense mechanisms to cover that up, lying, hiding underwear, getting angry when you tell him he needs to take care of his hygiene, etc. He dissociates when you show anger and irritation about even minor things. He tries to skip school a lot because it can be too overwhelming. Being a parent of a traumatized child can be very isolating. It is very emotionally difficult to care for his needs. You feel like you never have enough time. It's also hard to balance self-care so you don't burn out. You need to maintain a schedule for everyone's sanity, but he fights it every step of the way. Burnout is a very real thing. One extra stressor and you can feel like you're losing it. The other unspoken thing, especially with kids that are cognizant of their backgrounds, is clout and expectations. My husband and I both have master's degrees and both have professional jobs. He comes from a very poor family where most people were in gangs and never graduated from high school. We have paid days off and salaries. The people he grew up with / his family work sporadic jobs and are often broke and sleeping on people's couches. He has a PPO now when he had only seen Medicaid providers before. He expressed a lot of guilt about being placed with us when his siblings are in much worse situations. When we started this foster journey, we had hopes about him going to college and getting a professional job. But, with all the schools he had missed and his PTSD, he has a hard time concentrating at school and getting things done. A lot of basic skills about how to study were missed. At this point, we have been told by both his therapist and our own that his success is going to look very different than our own. Success for him might just mean having a stable life, processing his abuse, and having healthy relationships. Sometimes we push back at them and say, but he's capable of more, and that it feels like a cop-out to settle for less. I don't know. And our thoughts change on it daily. But what I do know is that if you are considering fostering, adopting, or obtaining guardianship of a teen, that you need to reach out to other foster parents of teens, preferably in your community. Their needs are so unique and oftentimes I cannot talk to normal parents about what I'm dealing with at home. My co-workers talk about their kids doing all of these science camps or extracurricular activities and our idea of success for that day is our kid not soiling himself and not skipping class. I fully expect that he will live with us after high school. Do I regret doing this? Some days yes, honestly. I question everything I do. Some days are really hard. Having a supportive partner to keep me in check and vice versa is huge. We have more good days now, and now that he is out of foster care, his mood has stabilized in a lot of ways. He has made an incredible amount of progress and is kind and compassionate given everything he has been through. I'm not going to lie, teens in general are hard. Teens with trauma are significantly harder. There is hope. Being as prepared as possible and having a support system helps tremendously. I'm looking forward to the adult he will become and want to be part of his life. I have no intention to underestimate the difficulty you go through, but I have to say, please believe it when they say his success is going to look very different from yours. Please do think of it as different and not inferior. The effort that it takes for him to get out of a dreadful lifestyle and adjust to a healthy one is no less than what it takes, on average, for a kid of graduates to follow their parents' path. It's a very different type of effort, and it should not be compared on a line. Maybe he won't be a great intellectual, but that does not make him any less worth getting on a stable surface after you grew up in a dark underwater place is a great success. I say this from a different position than yours. In my family, my mother was the first to get a university degree, and I'm the first to get a doctoral one. My partner has yet another formation path. I strongly reject any supposition of superiority to any of them. Many relationships end and lives are ruined because of excessive self-esteem on one side or a complex of inferiority on the other. Please consider the psychological weight of this. My parents adopted 2 sisters when they were 6 and 7 from Ukraine. My biggest suggestion is do your homework on the past of the child before. I know people want to be the hero by saving a child that has had a hard past, but people need to understand that odds are they will be affected by that past. Once my sisters hit puberty they became monsters, manipulating everyone they could, turning people against my parents by making up lies and ultimately getting my parents arrested, again by making lies. My parents drained their bank accounts trying to help them as well. Yes, my parents could have done some things better, and I could have been a better brother at times, but it would not have changed what they became. Eventually they both ended up on the streets. The older one is still there. Luckily the younger one realized what she did and changed. Now I'm proud to say she is in Navy boot camp training. I'm not saying don't help children in need, but understand that events in children's past affect what they become, so do your homework, especially when adopting from Russia or Ukraine. I had a friend who adopted an 18-month-old from Romania. He is a grown man now, but was diagnosed with dissociative disorder. He has lied, cheated, stolen from people over and over again. He is the most manipulative person, very handsome and gets away with so much. Ugh. Removed. What does this have to do with ops question though? My wife and I took in a youth kid who had pushed his caretakers to the limit and was going away all to us. He was 15 when we got him. He was 2 years behind in school because he had been kicked from regular school into alternative school, then expelled from school altogether from there. He had never driven, had serious anger issues, projected all that he'd been through on other people. He's been with us just about a year now. In that year he's completed 2 to 2.5 years of school, is looking at graduating early to go into college early, has brought his grades up to C+ averages, got his permit, has gotten a major handle on his outbursts, and is actually beginning to understand what real love is. He has 3 younger siblings here that call him brother, fight over who gets to sit with him and hang out with him. He and his brother decided to share a room so they could still hang out. I've yelled, cried, prayed for, prayed with, and done everything I can to get through that hard shell of his. I realize that a lot of it is just being there and not going away, or making love a condition. Convincing someone they aren't a habitual screw up isn't easy, but he is totally worth it. Removed. I adopted 2 siblings aged 7 and 11 out of foster care. Overall, I regret it, but I would probably do it all over again, since I know that everything we were able to do for them gave them a huge step up from where they came from. My ex and I have always regretted following their social workers and therapists' advice to allow them to be in close contact with their birth family. They idolized their older siblings and their ghetto culture and just couldn't break free from that mentality. They just want to do drugs, be promiscuous, and party 24/7. They are bright, beautiful, and lovely young women when they are on the right track, but they just don't want to be. Do you have other kids? My parents adopted a girl when she was 5 and I was 9. She is the devil. I left my parents' house the day I turned 18. They still blame me for leaving. She would kick my mom, call her a bitch. We got in multiple fist fights. I outweighed her by double by the time we were both teens. I'm surprised she didn't get killed, which is why I left. She has since had 5 kids. My parents are raising 2. 2 are dead from SIDS and the dad has the other one. Think of your kids, if you already have them. The adopted kid is going to need lots of attention. If this is the only kid, I would say yes. If you have kids, then no. It isn't fair to them. Be cautious. If you go the foster to adopt route, just keep this in mind. Child Services is incentivized to get kids adopted. They might fudge the truth to get you to sign. Then once you do sign, they'll fight you about setting up post-adoption services and literally hold the adoption over your head. Nasty business. Those services are critical, which brings me to kids don't grow out of mental health issues. As they get older, they develop more complicated relationships with their traumas. It could all get worse. Unless you have Cadillac health insurance, you'll be paying big money for child trauma specialists. Most of the good ones are out of network. Don't fool yourself into thinking love will just fix everything. As kids get older, they will have lots of questions, and you better think about your answers before diving into this. For example, why didn't you just have kids instead of adopt me? Can I go see my BO family? Why was I taken from my BO family? If the kid is a different race than you, it can introduce a whole new batch of issues and questions about their identity. Again, don't fool yourself into thinking it will all just be white picket fences and family parties and happily ever after. So I work as a teacher in middle school, grade 8 to 10. While working in grade 10, this kid, grade 9, 14-year-old, was all over the place, gave most of the teachers an headache, even the ones that didn't even teach him. He ended up in foster care, and he got shipped from one family to the next. We actually had a great relationship, we always joked around, and I think it's because I didn't have anything to do with him, and I never had to actually punish him. If he did something slightly mischievous while I was watching, I tried to not yell, but make a joke about it, but he at the same time understood why this behavior was wrong. They ended up asking if I could take him in. I lived alone at the time at the age of 28, and said yes. Didn't really know what I was doing, but at least I knew he was safe. He's now graduating year 10th this year, and I adopted him last year before Christmas. He still annoys some older teachers, but at least he's doing great in school, and mostly behaving. Got him in therapy and that has helped a lot. I also last year, November, ended up fostering one of my own kids in grade 8. He lost both his parents, and they asked if I could take him for a while. IOFC said yes, and he's still here. I would recommend everyone adopt older kids. You get so much joy from them surviving and thriving in a world that at some point was going against them. Removed. 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 Oh my, you watched until the end? That's fucking awesome, dude. Thanks for watching.